Live from Hong Kong, Coping with Isolation and Loneliness, the latest in a series of discussions on COVID-19 using the hashtag HKUCovid19. Sri Srinivasan will be hosting today's show. Our speaker is Professor Tatia Lee, Head Department of Psychology and Professor in Neuropsychology and Chair Professor of Psychology at Hong Kong University. We're streaming to Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Please submit your questions using the hashtag HKUCovid19. You can also email them to fightcovid19@hku.hk. Without further ado, our moderator, Sri Srinivasan.
Hello, everyone. It's 9 a.m. in Hong Kong, 2 a.m. in London, and 9 p.m. right here in New York City. It's day 47 of the lockdown in New York. My name is Sri Srinivasan, and I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism. Welcome to this live global conversation about the COVID-19 pandemic. Please hit share, tag your friends. Lots of people in the world would benefit from this conversation. Please share it as widely as you can. We want people to see this. We are on multiple platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We want you to connect, and we want us to connect with you. I'm honored to moderate this conversation brought to you by the University of Hong Kong. This is part of a series for all of us to learn lessons from what's happening in Hong Kong and Asia. We've spoken to various experts in the fields of medicine, public health, and economics. Last week, we even had a concert, wonderful Western classical music concert put together by the students of Hong Kong and the University of Hong Kong music students. It was absolutely wonderful. It was called COVID Cadenza, and you can find all of these shows on the archive of HKU 100 Facebook. Please look for them. Today, we have a change of pace, a conversation about issues of mental health, loneliness, depression, so many things that people are wrestling with around the world. Hundreds of millions of people are wrestling with this, and we have the perfect guest to help us with this topic. Professor Tatia Lee is the Chair Professor of Psychology and May Professor in Neuropsychology at the University of Hong Kong. As head of the Department of Psychology, she's also the director of the State Key Lab of Brain and Cognitive Studies. She is also a fellow of the American Psychology Association and National Academy of Neuropsychology. She has written over 240 articles, 120 conference papers, and 15 books. Her research interests include the normal and abnormal cognition and emotion across the lifespan. She's recently focused on devising evidence-based interventions for promoting brain health, including new breakthroughs in the understanding of neuroplasticity. We'll ask her what some of those terms mean. Her research team integrates neuroimaging and behavioral methodologies to explore the neural underpinnings of higher cognition in the front of the frontal lobe of the human brain, the part of the brain that directs humans' complex behaviors, including planning and personality development. Professor Lee and her team have devoted much effort on devising evidence-based interventions, and we're so happy and pleased to have her here. Please welcome Professor Tatia Lee.
Hi, everyone. Good morning or good evening.
Good evening from New York. Good morning in Hong Kong. I ask all our guests the first thing, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How is life on campus at the University of Hong Kong?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Life is very quiet on campus because today is a public holiday.
And that means that there aren't as many students, but what is happening when it's not a holiday? How much social distancing is there? Please inform us.
Well, in the last few months then, Hong Kong is also experiencing the lockdown. And I think the situation in Hong Kong is improving, but people shouldn't be off guard about, maintaining social distance to protect themselves from COVID-19.
Yes, I think that's very good advice, and we want everybody to share this. Post your comments. The professor's taking your comments, so please tweet or post with HKU COVID-19, HKU COVID-19, and please let us know what questions you have. So let's get right into it, Professor. We're so grateful for your time. Thank you. Your research has been focused on neuroscience. Can you explain to our audience what this is all about? How does neuroscience relate to the everyday life, and also what's happening with the connection to COVID-19?
Mm-hmm. I'm honored to be here. And neuroscience, in fact, is a science of studying brain function. And brain is a very important organ because it really defines who we are, and it regulates our functioning, and it regulates our behaviors. And brain is also a very malleable organ, meaning that it can change its structure and function and activity according to everyday experiences. And in that sense, then, what's happening during the period of COVID-19 pandemic, the experience that we have will make changes to our brain. And I think that is a reason why neuroscience is very applicable to understanding COVID-19.
All right, let's see. We have people watching around the world. Let's give some shout outs. We're going to pull some of the comments on. I've seen people from around the world. Ashok Sharma says, good day. Ashok is here. Let's see who else. We have people from watching. Mark Lee's watching from Durham, North Carolina. And who else? We have Mukhtar is watching from Nairobi in Kenya. That is awesome. David from Malaysia. Thank you, David, for being here. Please post your questions. Please post your comments as we are going through this. There are so many people are interested in this topic, Professor. Let me ask you, as you're listening to seeing this global conversation, how do you reflect on the value of these kinds of conversations for everybody who's involved?
I think it is absolutely important because there's a lot of rumors running around, and the way to dispel rumors is by scientific evidence, and platforms like this will help disseminate correct information, which can alleviate some of the unnecessary worries among people who are surviving under the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you. We have some great comments and greetings. Albert Lowe is watching from Hong Kong. We had Riaz Mavani watching from Vancouver in British Columbia. Nitin is watching from Dharamshala. So people, that's in India. So we have people from all over the world. We are so pleased to have this conversation. Let's ask you, do you think enough attention has been paid to the psychological impacts of COVID-19? And what are those impacts that are taking place right now on kind of a global scale?
I would say not yet. Whenever we are facing some potentially life-threatening situation, such as COVID-19 pandemic, the priority usually placed on physical health and safety. And therefore, it is inevitable that the psychological impacts associated with COVID-19 are being neglected in the first place. But we need to understand that these psychological impacts will have long-lasting impact on our mental well-being, because each of these impacts will leave marks on our brain, affecting our functioning and our behaviors.
Thank you very much. Let's keep going. It's so great to see all these comments here. I see a question from Professor Ying Chan, who asks about loneliness. How does loneliness affect our brain? Right now, I think we're all so scared about the loneliness factor, which we're all experiencing, social distancing in different ways. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Professor.
Yes. Our own research revealed evidence that loneliness is associated with change to a widespread brain network or circuitries associated with the process of executive control and affective regulation. So meaning that the sense of loneliness, in fact, will have a reflection from the functional organization of the brain. And in fact, in the vulnerable older people, they do present with loneliness-related neural network for processing negative emotion. And we believe that it is this specific processing that reinforces the views of the negative views of their lives, and that may precipitate, predispose, or maintain depression.
Thank you, Professor. We really appreciate your insights. We've got a chart we want to show you, which lays out some of these themes around loneliness. This is daily emotional experiences of US adults, and this is January to April. And this is showing enjoyment and percentage worry. So the green line is enjoyment, and the blue line is worry, and the gray line is stress. And you can see how they've all converged in that last quarter. So you're seeing from January 2018 to April 2020, right? You're seeing that longitudinal look at this, and that last September to April, look how it all has collapsed together in one place. Enjoyment, worry, and stress. What does this teach us, Professor?
Well, I think it's sort of informing us that the stress and the sense of loneliness induced by social isolation, and also the worry about being contracted the virus are bringing about the stress response in people's life. And in a short haul, then our resilience will be able to withstand that. But in this COVID-19 pandemic, it's been lasting for a few months. And the graph did mean that people are getting a bit stressed out by the stress caused by this COVID-19.
Thank you, Professor. One of the things that has been shocking to so many people is how much workers on the front line, healthcare workers, are being affected by this. And we saw the tragic story in New York of a doctor who was working on the front lines in the emergency room every day, 12 hours a day, and she committed suicide recently. It was really tragic. Monica Mirchandani is asking about this. She was infected with COVID-19, and when she recovered, she went back to work shortly after, committed suicide when visiting with family in North Carolina. Could COVID-19 have altered or affected her brain? And just what are your thoughts about what happened to her?
Yeah, I read the news. It's really sad. And I think I can't say, because I'm not a medical doctor, to say whether it's a virus that caused a change to the brain. But I guess it's a stress of dealing with, with life. Again, applicable to this poor lady is about, the stress of taking care of patients. And this stress could cause stress-related symptoms or depression-related symptoms. And among all the depression-related symptoms, then, the worst case would be the presentation of suicidal ideation. And of course, the worst cause of which is to attempt suicide and then commit suicide.
Thank you, Professor. We have so many questions and comments coming in. Let me ask, how do you advise people who are on the front lines, the stress that they feel? How do you advise them to deal with it? You have, I'm sure, some of your former students have gone on to work in different ways that were on the front lines. Please talk about that.
Yes. I think it's very important we should listen to our bodily signals. And if we feel that we're really stressed out and we shouldn't continue on and keep on the style of working, and we should give ourselves a break, I think it's just the body will give us a signal that when to stop. And if we know and we take a break, and then we can revert the detrimental effect of stress on our bodily function. And earlier on, you asked me about whether, COVID-19 will do something on the brain. And as I said, I don't know whether the virus will do something on the brain, but I do know that stress will do something on the brain. And prolonged stress will change our way of thinking about and seeing life, and thinking about life will develop that kind of negative bias and make us see things very negatively. And that predisposes us to have a suicidal ideation.
Thank you. We have some great questions and great comments coming in from around the world. This shows you how important this is for people. Please use the hashtag HKUCovid19. We're talking to Professor Tatia Lee, and I'm Sri Srinivasan in New York. She's in Hong Kong, and we're connected with the power of the internet. Do you see, Professor, the internet also having negative effects on other aspects of life that we are experiencing?
Well, I think depends on how you use the internet. And at this stage in life, the city lockdown and everything, internet really helped with creating the avenues for the social connectedness. And so in this regard, I would say so internet and social media are really beneficial.
Edith Mock says, hello from Hong Kong. Joseph is watching from Singapore. We have just so many people watching and learning together. And we have a great question from Rami Inocencio, who is the CBS News Asia correspondent, and has a couple of different questions. regarding the sign of depression. How do we even know we're depressed and not just tired or being affected by something else?
Mhm.
Sometimes I don't even know. So can you talk about that, please? And then we have a couple of follow-ups too.
Now, if we are tired, then our energy level will be able to resume to the normal limits with some rest. But if we are depressed and the energy level is low most of the time, and besides, it will have some associated symptoms. It won't be just feeling tiredness. So we will feel about the sleep disturbances. Will be a bit more irritable, and we'll lose our interest in things that we enjoy, and we'll have we don't have the energy to do things. We feel that we are guilty of everything, very low self-esteem, and we cry easily. And as what I said earlier, the worst case of all is that we will have some suicidal ideation.
And that's a real problem. Once that starts, that ideation, how do you pull back? If you're conscious that you're having it, what should be the first 2 or 3 things you do?
Mm-hmm. Seek help. Seek professional help. That is very, very important. And let your family members, let your beloved one know that you're in trouble. Don't keep it to yourself. Don't think that you can cope with it yourself. Because sometimes the mood can change very dramatically without our conscious notice, and things could go on an irreversible path.
And and we certainly see that there are lots of suicide helplines and hotlines. Almost every country has some version of that. Do you see some countries that are doing better at suicide prevention than others?
I can't say that some countries are doing better, but when a person is on the verge of having the suicidal ideation and at the verge of thinking about committing suicide, sometimes that moment of help, would be able to revert the whole course. So that's why seeking help is very important, and reaching out for help is very important.
Thank you. Cheng says, what are your views on social distancing impacting on people's long-term psychological behavior? Because my belief is that we as human beings are meant to be close, meant to connect, meant to touch. And here we are in the situation where we can't really do that. So we've never had in human, at least in the last 100 years, maybe human history, this forced isolation at this global scale.
Mm-hmm. We humans are social animals, so we need social interaction to give meaning to our lives. And so the social distancing, without the help of all the social media and internet assistance, then will be in a complete lockdown, not a city lockdown, but a personal lockdown. And we are not getting the reward and that we need, and the information that we need from our social interaction, and that could be very problematic. But now then, because we have our media to enable us to connect with other people, so the physical social distancing may not be such a big problem as compared with the time before when we don't have these media.
Thank you, Professor.
As long as we know how to make good use of it, of course.
Yes, absolutely. We have questions coming in from around the world, folks. Please keep tagging. Please keep asking. Use the hashtag HKUCovid-19. And please connect with HKU, the University of Hong Kong, on Twitter, on Facebook. I'm at Sree on Twitter, SREE on Twitter. And I'm learning so much, and I know so many people are. We have a question from Lillian, a professor of the National Taiwan University. What are the support systems and programs which have been introduced to help those coping with isolation in this crisis?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of self-initiated programs in Hong Kong, and also Hong Kong is a city that majority of which are living with an is a small city, so majority of us are lived in a sort of an extended family network, and so there's a lot of a support, as I said, self-initiated support, social support, and to combat against social isolation, and especially the detrimental effect for older people. And having said that, a lot of social services units and are also initiating programs to help to combat the detrimental effect of social isolation.
Thank you. We have a former student saying hello to you. Let's go to that comment. That is very nice to see. Karen Chan says, Professor Tatia Lee, you were my neuropsychology professor during my bachelor's degree. It's so wonderful to listen to you again. Thank you for your teaching. Dr. Karen Chan from Hong Kong. Tell us how you feel seeing that, Tasha. Professor
Thank
Lee.
you, Karen.
Okay, you're speaking very very succinctly, so that's nice. We have a comment, another question from Remy, who is a CBS News correspondent for Asia, and the question is, how do you feel motivation? Should I just get up and go running, call a friend, but I'm not sure how to get motivated?
Yeah. This is a very, very good question, because for us and for human beings, it's always hard to get the first step. And this is a very reason why we have a very evolved frontal lobe, because this frontal lobe that can ask us or regulate us to do things that is against our instinct. So for example, our instinct is wanting to stay in bed. So this is the frontal lobe that will say, come on, wake up, do the things. All right. So coming back, what are the things that we could do to get started with the first step? I would say, number one, take a deep breath. If it's something really against your will or your instinct, so take a deep breath, calm down, and tell yourself that, the initial start will be a bit challenging. But once you've gone through the initial hop, and you will feel much better. And take doing exercise as an example. So if you need to start over doing aerobic exercise, and you may think that, it's very tiring. But tell yourself that once you get started, and especially if the intensity reaches threshold for the body to release the mood-raising endorphins, and you'll feel much better. And other ways of doing it is that maybe you can also liaise with your peers who are also motivated to do the things that you want to do, although at a social distance, but you are connected via internet. So each of you can motivate each other to complete a task. And after all, then if you make it into incorporate it into your habit and incorporate it into your daily routine, that will make it much easier to do the task.
All right, we just saw a picture of the brain. Let's look at it again. Can you explain the different parts? I know you've mentioned some before, so we're going to show it again. Mm-hmm. And which way are we looking? Where is the frontal lobe, the front part? Where is the face in this case? Is he facing right or facing left? And then please explain.
The frontal lobe is the greenish gray area, which is under the frontal lobe is where the base of the frontal lobe is where you find your eyes. All right. Excellent. And so this one, on the screen is facing the right side. That is your frontal lobe, and that is the front part of the brain.
And can you explain each of the parts? There are about 4 parts there that I see.
And so there is a central sulcus there. And the central sulcus is almost the marks separating the anterior part of the brain and from the posterior part of the brain. So basically, behind the central sulcus, you have the parietal lobe, and then you have the occipital lobe, you have the temporal lobe. And these areas are in fact for receiving information from the environment. So for example, the occipital lobe is responsible for decoding information that we see. The temporal lobe carries many functions, but one basic function is to decode information that we hear. And the parietal lobe is for decoding information that we sense. So basically, for the posterior part of the brain, it integrates information that comes into the brain from the outside world. And once we acquire an understanding of what's happening in the external environment, and to keep the long story short, we'll send the information to the frontal lobe, where we do all the planning and probability checking and decision making to decide on the course of action. And so the frontal lobe, just in front of the frontal lobe is a motor area, but further front of the frontal lobe is the very important area for our human function, and it's the most evolved area proportionally in the whole primate family. And it is because we human got a very highly evolved prefrontal area, we call. That's why we can do a lot of abstract reasoning. We can manipulate the world, we can change the world, we can build the world, and at the same time we can destroy the world.
Thank you. I found that very enlightening. Professor, you are a psychologist, and the traditional description of psychologists is that there's a couch in their office. And so I want to look behind you and see if we have a couch. And we also have a box of tissues where people can express themselves. Tell me how you interact with your patients. Do you have time for, are you practicing every day, every week? How do you have your own patients? You work with the university. Talk about that, please.
Oh, okay. Well, I think having a couch is a very Freudian thing, and is a misconception about how we psychologists practice. I myself, I do carry a clinical load, not a heavy one, a clinical load that is to fulfill my passion to do clinical work, but also to upkeep my clinical skills to do clinical teaching. And patient contact, because I'm a clinical neuropsychologist, so the patient type or patients that I would see mostly are people with brain injuries or brain related problems. But I do see patients that suffer from mood problems, mood related problem, anxiety, depression.
Thank you. We have a question coming in from Facebook. Dora says, would the brain hurt caused by stress be forever or just temporary? And hello from Hong Kong.
Hello. Well, the brain is a highly resilient organ, and the stress does exercise effect on the structure and activity of the brain. But if it is for a short haul, the brain is very capable of bouncing back, and it shouldn't leave, permanent damage to the brain. But if something is very chronic, then it will start making changes to the structure and started making changes to the connection between the neurons in the brain. And to the point that it will be much harder for the brain to reverse it. But having said that, as what I said earlier on, and our brain is very plastic, and the degree of plasticity changes across the lifespan, of course. But even at an older age, our brain remains to be very plastic. Our brain remains to be very capable of generating a small number of stem cells. So, so as long as we practice, strategies that can promote our brain health, doing cognitive exercise, and practice ways to regulate our emotions, I think we would be able to achieve, healthier life for a longer time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. These are great answers for us as we all learn together. We have a question from Twitter. Remember, folks, we're talking live right now on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and we're just gathering these conversations that are taking place elsewhere and then showing them to you. We do this as part of our series from the University of Hong Kong. If you like what you're watching, please follow, please connect, please tell your friends there's somebody in the world right now who would benefit from this conversation. Please tag them on Facebook. Please forward this to them. Please direct message to them. Send it to them on WhatsApp. A chance to learn from our professor, Professor Tatia Lee, who is sharing with us such great information. We have a question from Twitter. Meg says, have you seen digital health solutions that have been helpful for mental health during this time? We also had a similar question about telehealth. And so digital health and telehealth are slightly different, and you can talk about those. Thank you.
Sure. I don't think I have the expertise to differentiate both. But anyway, I think, no matter what means we're talking about, these two means are aiming at connecting people socially during this period of city lockdown or self-isolation. And I think it's not just, a connection by internet or so, but it's the meaning of that connection. Even without internet, simple phone call, text messages, expressing a sense of concern, expressing, and most importantly, that empathic understanding of the worries of the other party, I think that will help all of us. And if we work together to cope with, the detrimental effects, the psychological effect brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic.
let's take a look at some of the questions and the comments coming in. We have people from around the world watching, and we are just compiling all these comments. So we're going to show you some of them, and I'm going to read them to you so you know this truly global conversation. Eric says, hello. Let's keep seeing these comments. Carla says, kudos to Rami for the great work he's been doing on CBS News. So we're connecting. And Carla Baranakis is watching from New Jersey. She's the former national copy chief of the New York Times and a great friend of this show. So thank you, Carla. And she has a picture of a dog. Mark, here in America, there's concern about an overdependence on psychological medicine. Is this global or just here? Lots of, I'm on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in New York. The joke is that there are more psychiatrists here per person than anywhere in the world. I don't know if that's true, but we say that. And there's a lot of emphasis given on therapy and talking and also medication. So can you talk about comparing this around the world, please?
Now, I'm going to give a common sense guess. I think the use of medication is a bit more intense in North America, I would say, than in Hong Kong here. I guess this part and parcel about is related to the cultural difference and the accessibility of different types of drugs, and also advertisement of different types of drug to people in Hong Kong.
Thank you. We saw some comments here from Monica Mirchandani, who explains the difference between telehealth and digital health. And what she says is that when you're looking at this, that telemedicine is providing patient interaction that is not in person, can include phone or video, and digital health is any app or tool that is not face-to-face and helps the patient. So they're kind of tied together, but they may be a little different as well. So thank you, Monica, for that. With so many comments coming in from all over, so we're going to look at some more of the comments as they come in. We are just so grateful to everybody. Joe is watching near Atlanta in the United States. PTSD was prevalent during 9/11. I'm avoiding too many news programs as it's creating stress, lack of sleep, and nightmares. So we saw that in 9/11, and we're worried about it now as well.
Well, in fact, one way we should be cautious about is to be overly consumed by the news of COVID-19, and people staying by the TV set or whatever means, or internet or whatnot, to try to catch the news of COVID-19 can be negatively affected. My advice is to balance it with some other entertainment programs or even your hobbies, so as to balance it out. Otherwise, then the only information we'll receive in a day is all negative input to our brain.
Thank you. Joe Huey says, are there any cognitive or other kinds of exercises that you will particularly recommend for people to overcome the impact that is brought about by homebound and social distancing situation?
Cognitive exercise is very important, but I think first of all that we should engage in routine and regular physical exercise. Even though we are homebound, we can still do that. And cognitive exercise are many different things. We can do reading depending on your interest, music appreciation, puzzles, things like that. Or even if we can play group games via internet. And these are all, group games with a problem-solving element, group games with a team playing element, and that are all very beneficial.
Thank you. Prabodh Kumar Sharma has a question. Can you explain why acoustic neuroma is more common in women than men? Any particular reason for that? I'm sorry to say I don't know what acoustic neuroma is.
It is a tumor on one of our cranial nerve. But because I'm not a medical expert, I am afraid I can't answer these questions.
Okay. You use the word plasticity a lot. We hear that word neuroplasticity, plasticity. Tell us what that means exactly for people who are hearing that and not sure what it is.
Yeah. When I said plastic or plasticity and neuroplasticity, I meant that our brain is very resilient, meaning that our brain can change according to experience. So sometimes you read the term experience-induced neuroplastic changes. Now, it is because this very nature of our brain that we can learn, and by learning, we can change the brain, we can change our way of functioning. And this degree of neuroplasticity enable us to, to build the brain and also to recover from brain injuries. Because without this element, then if we suffer from any form of brain injuries, then there's no way we could recover from the injury. And this degree of neuroplasticity changes across the lifespan, and we retain it even when we are at an older age, depending on the type of experience and the amount of experience that we input into our brain.
Thank you. We have so many comments coming in from all over, and I just want to show everybody that we're having a truly global conversation and how exciting it is to talk to Professor Lee. We've got people watching. We've got also questions coming in here. Wong says, what are the long and short-term psychological problems that are caused by COVID-19?
I think short-term wise, there will be some stress and fear-related problems, as I have said earlier, about people becoming a little bit more irritable and causing interpersonal conflicts within the domestic environment, especially nowadays, and they have spent a little bit more time at home with their family members than before. And that may, in a short haul, there may be a short-term sleep disturbances and the disruption of a daily routine, and will affect your sleep pattern and everything. But in the long haul, then, if these symptoms continue, then the person may develop clinical condition, stress-related clinical conditions such as depression and anxiety. And to that stage, then the person would definitely need medical attention and professional help.
Thank you. Let's go on a trip around the world. We have people watching from so many places. We're so glad to have these comments. We've seen people watching from Canada, watching from Nairobi, watching from India. We're just so glad to have all of these questions here. PK Sharma has another question from Riverdale, New York. Being a father of two physicians in the family, married to two physicians, it's really difficult to explain to you how stressful it is these days for families in this situation. And it doesn't just have to be doctors. You could be a family where you're police men or women, or firefighters, or ambulance workers, or grocery store employees. Talk of food delivery. Like everybody, there's stress for the workers, but there is also stress for the family. So what can they do, Professor?
It's definitely very stressful. And it may be hard to explain the situation to your family members, to young children at this stage. So maybe this is not the timing to do so. The immediate measure that you need to take is to protect yourself and to, as what I said earlier, and be cautious about your bodily signal. If you feel that you're really stressed out, you really need a break. And protect yourself first. And then at a later time, when timing is good, then I'm sure that then you can explain to your children about what you have been through. And then that was the time when each of you will have some personal space to be able to comprehend, the significant effect of the pandemic.
Thank you, Professor. We have just a few minutes left with you. I'd love to hear a little bit of your own journey. When did you decide you want to be a psychologist? And how did you decide that that's the way you're going to go versus any other path that you could have taken in your academic career?
Thank you for these questions. I wanted to be a psychologist even when I was in high school. But during that time in high school, then this is a very unusual choice of career path. And so I just got that passion. I wanted to be a psychologist. So that's why I pursue it.
And what is the most interesting part? Somebody watching, some young person watching is thinking, I could be a psychologist. What is the hardest part about being a psychologist? And what is something that may surprise people about being a psychologist?
For people who really want to be a psychologist, you have to be aware that you are there for your practice and you're there to receive negative information from your patients. I guess people who are happy, who are very positive will not come forward to see you, to see us, to see psychologists. So people showing up at the doorstep of a psychologist's office, usually they have issues in their life. So they have to be, to bear that in mind that that's the type of work that they are going to face. And so then you would ask them why somebody would like to be in their shoes to take on all the negative information or negative impact from other people. And think about physical health and psychological health. And physical well-being and psychological well-being, in fact, are two very interlocking and interactive components of our bodily functioning. And they influence each other. And for example, high stress predicts strongly on the negative general physical health and then our immune functioning. So, and the psychological world of a person is the most private part of that person. And this is part of a person that is not easily open up to seek for help. And so I feel that pursuing clinical psychology as my career would enable me to provide support to people who are in need of such help so that they can maximize their potential and they can be a being that they enjoy to be and they would like themselves to be.
Thank you. Now, here's a question for you, Professor. What do you do to keep your brain healthy?
I do some exercise. I mean, you all know that, being a professionals and would be able to advise people the way to practice good lifestyles. And we are always a bad patients. We are not really practicing that. So, but no, I practice regular exercise and I practice, positive way of seeing things. And most importantly, I'm grateful for what I have. I'm grateful for, every day I can take my first breath and I'm still alive and I'm grateful for that.
Wow, that's a very positive outlook, and leave it to a psychologist to come up with that. Can you explain for people who are not clear, what is the difference between psychiatry and psychology?
Now, in the Western world, all right, psychiatry is based on medicine, and psychologists are based from psychology training. And so psychiatrists then in most geographic location, psychiatrists would administer medication, and psychologists usually do not prescribe. And psychologists use behavioral intervention, psychotherapy to help promote well-being of a person. And psychologists would do a lot of assessment, like cognitive assessment, to see the impact of something or like a pathogen or stress or a condition on the effect on the brain. How does it affect the cognitive functioning of the brain? For example, the attention, the memory, problem-solving ability of the person. These ability are being impaired in brain injury situations such as a tumor, such as a head injury trauma, such as stroke, and such as Alzheimer's.
Thank you. We have a question from Jane who asks, how would you advise people to avoid domestic violence during this homebound period? It's a question that we face in so many stressful situations, but now it feels like the stress level has been amped up and everybody's crowded in a small apartment or even a big house. They can feel like they're all on top of each other. Yes?
As I said earlier, when we are experiencing some short-term stress or high stress, then we become a bit more irritable. And now that we're being locked down in a domestic environment, so the person to take out your temper maybe is your loved one. And in situation like this, then we always say, when you feel that your temper is coming up, and I mean, it's like a ping pong game that it needs to be played by both parties. So if one party realizes the other is about to be provoked, then stop and walk away. Or the other party feels that the temper is really coming up, and stop and walk away, have a drink of cold water, and think about other things. When the two parties cool down, then maybe that's a time for good communication to discuss about the concern and the worries and to resolve conflicts. That's the most constructive way of doing things.
Thank you. And PK Sharma, who had commented earlier about having the doctors married to doctors in his family, he was pointing out that his family especially is they're facing coronavirus patients every day. So they are putting themselves, as doctors are, in grave danger every day when they're out there. And so our hearts go out to all the frontline workers, the healthcare workers. That's really, really important. Arlene, watching in New York, has a question for you, or a comment really, about pets and the use of pets and animals in feeling better. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, of course. I think it's an emotional connection with an object, and having a pet, so you can feel, even with the social distancing, you feel that you are connected socially with an object. So that's why it's helpful.
Thank you, Professor. We have so many great questions and comments coming in from all over. We are so glad to have them. Well, let's do a trip around the world. Let's once again see where we've had people coming from. We love seeing this. We're so glad you're part of the series, #HKU COVID-19. We're doing so many of these conversations. Please go back into our archives at HKU100 on Facebook, and you can find them. You can also find them on my YouTube channel, which is Sreenet, SREENET. I'm at SREE on YouTube. Aparna Mukherjee is watching from LA, and she says, we asked her, where are you watching from? She says, LA every day. And Arlene was also saying that, she may have to get a cat or a dog if she's quarantined any longer. What can you do about the frustration you're feeling at the governments of your respective, it could be the country, could be the state, could be your municipality, and when you're seeing different rules in different places. My town is locked, but the other state is open. How is that possible? How do I deal with it? How do I explain to my children when you see on TV people are going to the beach and you're telling me I have to stay locked down?
Mm-hmm. Well, personally, I feel, feeling negative about why somebody got a better treatment than you are is not going to help your mental well-being, because you are using your energy to make that comparison, and you're not going to change whatever the other the treatment that the other is receiving. So I would instead use the energy to promote my own mental health, and to establish a daily routine, and to keep a normal sleep-wake cycle, even at this stage when there's a city lockdown, when the work and social activities are cut to the minimum, and exercise regularly, both cognitive and physical. And I said earlier on, don't be overly consumed by the news of COVID-19, and very importantly, communicate with your loved one, with your friends, share your worries, and discuss about, what's the best strategy out, and dispel all the rumors with scientific evidence.
Thank you. We have a question from Facebook, and it's from Professor Tatia. Question for Professor Tatia Lee from Dr. Bibiana Chan from Sydney in Australia. And Bibiana says, so nice to join your talk via live stream. And other than loneliness, people also feel bored and anxious. Would you share your tips on how to deal with boredom?
Mm-hmm. Now, I think boredom is a subjective sense, just like loneliness. Loneliness is a subjective sense of feeling lonely, which cannot be reflected by who and how many people are in the objective environment, as what I said earlier. So boredom is the same thing, it's a subjective sense, and the person has to cultivate, something that he or she enjoy and he or she find meaning to work with and engage with doing that thing. And about dealing with anxiety, well, I just share some tips of what we could do about, maintaining a routine and so on. And our research evidence show that, mind training in the form of meditation, in fact, can induce neuroplastic changes to brain activities associated with the regulating of the impact of emotion on us. And other things that we could do is to practice a professionally guided deep breathing exercise to combat anxiety symptoms. Here, I stress about the importance of a professionally guided training, because the protocol has to be scientifically proven to target at the autonomic nervous system of the brain, the autonomic nervous system of brain that regulates our fear-induced anxiety responses.
Thank you, Professor. What a great set of answers. We got so many questions in. We really appreciate your time and your expertise that you've shared with us. Everybody, you've been watching a show with Professor Tatia Lee. One of the things, Professor, you might be surprised, you do interviews all the time. In these shows, we like to repeat the introduction so that people who have just joined us at the end as soon as we're done, we'll rewind and watch the whole thing again. So please bear with me as I read your very, very distinguished CV. Our conversation has been live from Hong Kong with Professor Tatia Lee. She is the Chair Professor of Psychology and May Professor in Neuropsychology at the University of Hong Kong. As head of the Department of Psychology, she's also the director of the State Key Lab of Brain and Cognitive Sciences, and she's a fellow of the American Psychological Association and the National Academy of Neuropsychology. So I'm going to come to you, Professor, for a final thought and your final item that you would like to share, anything that you'd like to share, or we'd like to hear from you.
Yes. So again, it's my honor to be here, and it's my pleasure, my greatest pleasure, to meet people all over the world. And thank you for the people who are organizing it. And I wish every one of us all the best. I hope that we can dispel about our negative thoughts and negative feelings about what we don't have, what is missing, but join hands to build what is not there. And like in Hong Kong, I think the situation is quite well controlled. It's because of the effort, the joint effort of all parties from every single tier that to achieve this very satisfactory outcome. But we shouldn't be off guard about, we shouldn't be too happy too soon that a pandemic is gone. So we should still be cautious. So again, one last word, let's join our effort and join hands to fight COVID-19. I'm sure that we will make a brighter future with our joint effort.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. We can't shake hands, so maybe we can go a high five. Maybe you can give me a high five on the screen. There you go. Yes. We did it. And thank you. And I just want to thank the professor. Let me just ask you, it's your start of your day there. It's the end of my day here. What is on your schedule for today? I know it's a public holiday today, so.
I'm going to write some papers after this interview.
Okay, very, very good. Thank you very much, Professor. We've been talking to Professor Tatia Lee, who is the chair of psychology, chair professor of psychology, and May professor in neuropsychology at the University of Hong Kong. This is a series of conversations we've been having with experts from the University of Hong Kong so that we can learn from what's happening in Hong Kong, in Asia, all over the world. We're learning. We're so grateful for this international show. Please keep watching. Please share this with your friends. Please tag your friends and tell them to watch this show. And you can go back into the HKU 100 and you can see the entire list of comments and videos that you can watch there from the series. We've talked to experts in fields of medicine, public health, and economics. And today we talked about psychology. You can even see a wonderful concert we had last week with a group of Hong Kong, from University of Hong Kong students who were musicians, and they just did a wonderful job. So we're so grateful. My name is Sri Srinivasan, and I am a professor at Stony Brook University, the School of Journalism. I'm at Sri on Twitter, SREE, and my email is sree@sree.net, SREE@sree.net. Thank you so much. We'll see you again.